Wallawani, everybody. I'm Hollie from the Wise Women Gathering. I'm here on WWG23 land, and I'm here with Brenda Rogers. You can hear in my voice that I'm a little fragile today, and I'm taking my herbs, and I just ate a piece of garlic, and I just drank some homemade quercetin, and so I am dosing myself as best I can. I think I'm having the download of whatever I need to drop before we move into the next few weeks. So I'm glad it's happening now and not like next week or the week after, right? So don't worry about me, but also feel free to send me lots of supportive vibes. And
Feels right.
so, yeah. So, Brenda, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you are in the world and a bit about you. What brings you here?
Well, I'm a Sydney girl, actually born here and on Darug land. So my respects to all of that beautiful wisdom and the honouring of the elders. And that's that's where I've headed the last few years. I'm absolutely in love with the traditional ways of doing things, and even all of my nutrition has moved into the wise traditions diet based on the research of Weston Price. And I just love that connection. So I love being in the kitchen. I'm a stepmom of an 18-year-old and have a beautiful husband that we got married late last year. He's American, so I feel like I'm in an interracial relationship, which I am actually, because even though they speak the same language, they're very different.
Culture is so different to ours, right?
Yeah, it creates some conflict and it creates some unity. So, yeah, that's my work is around supporting menopausal and midlife women. I have just fell in love with that age range and the needs they have, specifically what they need, and to be able to build a business and build a message that supports women at that stage of their lives. And, women around 50 often have 30-year-old daughters who often have young babies. So it's interesting how there's that beautiful flow, and sometimes up the generations as well, just by targeting that beautiful, lovely group of women.
Yeah. And that, so I remember, I don't know who it was, but one of our regular wise women came to me and at a conference and said, you have to meet this Brenda Rogers. She's got really good work to share with women. She's really like excited about, the menopausal stage, whatever. And yeah, so there's some flurry about what you're doing in the community, right? And we've had you as an educator now for a few years. Tell us about why you keep coming back to Wise Women Gathering.
I think I feel obligated now because I've been to all of them, and it's like it just goes onto the annual calendar and I just don't even question it because
Part of
it
your year.
it fills my cup, and I've just tell everyone about it. And and sometimes I'm surprised because I think, I like to dress nicely. I'm a corporate, I've been in corporate for a long time, and I drove a sports car, and so I think, am I even in the right place for myself? But the first one, I was in such a dark place in my own life. I'd lost a baby. I was having a massive midlife crisis. And I just was following the breadcrumbs that told me go. And what turned out to be a message about doing women's work. Because within a year, I'd attended the Wise Women's Gathering. I'd studied yin yoga, which is a very feminine form of yoga. And I had trained up, or experienced and decided to train up in something called the art of feminine presence. And it was just like, okay, because, when you have that dark night of the soul, that was my opportunity to hand myself over to the universe, the divine source, whatever you want to call it, and let myself be guided. And it's not easy. I've spent the last 5 years or so and more learning to let go, and I'm not even there yet. But I find that the people that I meet at the gathering, I think Jane Hardwick Collins just revolutionized my life. I can't tell you how grateful I am for having met her and done her Harvest Queen, 1 hour session, and it opened up my eyes to something absolutely beautiful. And
What
that
was
was,
that? What did it open you up to?
it was I guess it was the role of the postmenopausal woman. It was that life isn't over and that it gets even better. You get more powerful after your menstruation finishes. And that in the context of women's power generally and the sacredness of women, I think I really needed to hear that. I just drank that in because my whole life I'd struggled with self-esteem and self-worth and finding my place. And that just felt like a missing part of the puzzle. And she just explained it so beautifully. It made so much sense. And it just connected me to, it connected me to all women, I think, because I hadn't been able to have a child. So I wasn't connecting to other women through childbearing. I wasn't married at the time. I hadn't had that rite of passage. I just felt like I was missing out on lots of things. And then I had this beautiful awakening. And mind you, my first one was very difficult. I'd lost the baby, and then there were babies and mothers and children and young people everywhere. And it was very, very confronting for me. I was in a tender space, but I did feel nourished and nurtured from it.
That's so beautiful that, yeah, like all that vulnerability was there and yet you could find the nourishment too, right? Yeah,
You
so
kind of
good.
really need it, don't you, when you're down.
Yeah, and that really speaks to like just showing up even when you're not really sure what's going to happen, or, and of course you want to be able to trust the space that you're showing up to. But sometimes it turns out it's what you need even when you don't need it, when you don't know it, right? And so speaking about Jane Hardwick, just for people listening, we do have a session with Sequoia tomorrow, which it goes into depth about the School of Shamanic Womancraft and the sorts of things they teach. So if you're like, ooh, whatever Brenda just talked about sounds amazing, then definitely check that session out with Sequoia. And so but before that, you had a long story in health, right? Like you've been involved with natural health for a while. Tell us a bit about like the history of Brenda, or the herstory of Brenda.
Yeah, so I've been a naturopath 31 years this year, and I learned it when it was still a little bit old school, when it was just emerging in the late 80s. And I was 20 something, and I was thinking, early 20s, thinking I've got to choose a career. What am I supposed to do? I had gotten into biochemistry at university. I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to do that. And then I opened up this career book and careers guide, and I saw naturopathy in there, and I went, oh my goodness, this is for me, and moved to Sydney to start studying it. And
did you have anything to do with natural health before that? Like, had you been into health food or like done any sort of therapies,
well,
natural
I think of
therapies?
myself and my heritage, particularly on my mother's side, to be peasant, really. And my mother was born in Holland, and I feel like a peasant. I love farm food. I love, heavy rye breads, and not that my guts always love them, but not really. There wasn't any. I didn't have a mother who was into it. My mum cooked, but that was because that's all we could afford. And so it was also cross-cultural, family, I guess, in a way. But no, it felt like a calling. and I sometimes wonder, if I, I've got a great grandmother or something down my mother line somewhere who's,
Some witch in there.
yeah, there's certainly teachers. And I think there's a correlation between the teacher, the coach, the healer, and, what we see all of that. And I think I was speaking to someone yesterday who's also trained as a naturopath and now is a psychologist. And she's like, I can't do psychology without teaching. It's an empowering part of it. You give the why as well as the what.
Yeah.
So there was definitely teachers in my my grandmother, my aunt, both my aunts with high school teachers, school teachers. So is that what you were meaning in terms?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's pretty unusual, I think, from our overculture to just open a book and go, I'm going to do that strange thing that I've not really ever seen or heard of and see what happens.
But I'm also a Virgo, and apparently we're into all of this stuff.
Right. That's the explanation. Yeah, how interesting. Okay, so you did that, you went into naturopathy, and then what happens?
Well, I won the clinician award or something, and I got taken up by Blackmores. So I was very young. I wasn't very good with responsibility at the time. So I wasn't going to go into practice. So I went and worked for Blackmores, and I worked for Blackmores for 6 years. They were so good to me. And that it was the very beginning. When I first started there, they had a call line for people to get advice from a naturopath. But soon after I started, they introduced the 1-800 number. And we went from just me to, I ended up running that department. I think there were 12 naturopaths. We had the clinic. We had a postgraduate training program for practitioners in the celloids and in herbs with Dennis Stewart, and I loved it. It was regular and consistent income, which is always a challenge. Um, and
How did that call line look? Like, I mean, this is old school stuff, right? Like, so people were calling to get advice, and then were you taking an order for them and shipping it to them from that conversation? No, so
no,
then they just go to the shop or the chemist and grab their Blackmores.
yeah. So
Wow.
we would have health food store owners and practitioners call in, and the general public.
Hmm,
So
amazing.
I think it was good training. I learned to identify things very simply, and we were trained to give a nutrient like vitamin C or zinc or a multi or something like that, a herb or herb blend, and a celloid, the minerals, the cell salts.
Mm.
And that was very good training ground for what was to come. So that I went back and retrained as a naturopath in 2013 and gained my advanced diploma, because when I did it there was only the diplomas, and training in naturopathy had changed enormously in that 20 years, less than 20 years. It had become a little bit hijacked by the mainstream in some ways. But nothing wrong with that. There's an evolution in everything, and that there was a lot more. It needs to be evidence-based. A lot of more of that masculine kind of perspective coming into it, and I love that too. It was nice to have some validation. I mean, how often do we say, "Oh, your naturopaths have known that for decades," and suddenly it's in the news because some researcher has discovered it. So a lot of this wisdom is really old wisdom. We're just tapping into what's been around for millennia, and the herbal
What
knowledge.
what changed in you doing that first diploma and then going back for the advanced diploma? What changed within you as you moved out from that? It's probably a long time back to think about.
Yeah. Um. mm. Yeah, I asked me a similar question, but slightly different,
Mm.
because I don't know how to answer that one.
Yeah, okay. So how did you come out of that second training as a practitioner and as a person? How did you come out differently than when you went in?
Um, I think that the world had changed a lot around natural medicine in that time. And, I'd been a part of it through Blackmores and then drifted away. And, it's not easy to, not always easy to build a career in natural medicine. Our competitors are free. So, um, and I was starting to wonder if I was just doing naturopathy to heal myself, and there was something else that I was meant to do. And I had, worked for other companies and kept having this calling to come back to my own business. And in the meantime, I'd done a lot of other things. So I'd become a life coach in 2005, studied that for a couple of years. I had deepened my knowledge of homeopathy, because back when I did my diploma, homeopathy was still part of the qualification. At some point, it got split off, and then it's kind of out of favor at the moment. Let's bring it back. And so I had matured a lot. I was then into my 30s or even older, and water under the bridge. You lots of wounds, lots of mistakes, lots of failed relationships, lots of life experience. So I just started to find natural medicine was the anchor for me in my own healing and my own growth. And I moved more and more into the transformational aspects, the spiritual aspects. And I read somewhere recently, not recently, but I'm constantly reminded of this, that health and well-being is not the destination, that being healthy and well is simply so that we can fulfill our purpose. So I think that I had gone beyond physical health. So in that evidence-based perspective, which has kind of in some ways sanitized the training and taken out some of the, the woo-woo, which is often the spiritual, the emotional. And I was not really comfortable with that, because the more you dive into and absorb natural medicine, the more that it blends in with, Stephen Covey talks about the four intelligences, which includes EQ and SQ, as well as our, our ability to take care of our bodies. And so that this is just the vehicle for the spiritual experience that life is. And so I think that maturity had changed me like that. And then what I learned, some of it I was disappointed in. Some of it was like, I don't really want naturopathy to go this way. I don't want them to take iridology away. I don't want them to take the woo-woo stuff away. That's the magic. That's the art. But in other ways, I deepened my knowledge of other things as well. So I don't know. I mean, sometimes you kind of run life, and sometimes we think that life is meant to be directed quite deliberately. You create a plan, and just it's never worked out like that for me. So
Yeah.
I
Kelly
just
and I were talking about that just now about all the things you do are threads that weave into the tapestry of who you are ongoingly. Like that wheel keeps turning and the tapestry gets thicker and more rich, but there's no like one thing that you can say is the thing.
No, 100%. And that's what's so beautiful working with women when you're in your 50s, is that the righteousness. Oh, I don't know if it's gone. I don't know if we ever get rid of righteousness. I think it's the ego loves to jump in where it can. But the judgment softens, and the righteousness softens, and we've had our hearts cracked open. And even though you may not be fully trained in colonization or decolonization, or how to trauma or be trauma informed. I think there's this element of us having lived life that becomes more empathetic, and that certainly happened to me.
It's that life experience that rubs off and you realize that your way is not the only way and there's plenty else going on out there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So your session is called Serene Queen Mood Medicine for Mature Women. It feels like this is a combination of women's mystery stream and plant wisdom. Can you
Yes.
don't tell us like what you're going to do, but just give us some of the magic, the essence of it.
Well, I want to bring in Jane's work, that menopause, the other M is menopause, is mood medicine for midlife women and mature women, and menopause. I want to bring in that and normalize the emotional journey that menopause is, and to inquire into so if you're feeling low, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling anxious, if you're up and down, if your premenstrual time is, and you're still menstruating and your premenstrual time is awful, what can be the explanation underneath that? What can we normalize? Because we're in a culture that pathologizes everything. Certainly a medical profession that loves to pathologize everything in order to prescribe a drug. And so grief gets pathologized, and anger, women can't be angry, especially older women. There's so many, images of angry old women that we get fed, it's like, oh no, I don't want to go there. So I want to delve into normalizing some of the emotional response to the journey of midlife menopause. And what I'm talking about is as we transition from being estrogen driven and being, that signature of hormones makes us who we are in that stage of life. And then that diminishes, that all those hormones withdraw in our late 40s, and then a new hormone profile, new hormone signature takes its place, and that drives a different personality. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we think that what we're leaving behind is who we are, and what we're stepping into is not who we are. And that's not correct, because we've forgotten that at some point we were 8 years old with a different hormone profile where we're all sweetness and light, some of us. and then estrogen took over and we became what we became as a teenager. And then given that conversation, what can we do to support our mood? Mood and emotional health aren't exactly the same. Moods are often maybe suppressed emotion, or maybe in denial about an emotion, or I think when women are talking about moods, they're also talking about the up and downness of moods, especially with the cycle. So there's the element of understanding the 4 weeks of the cycle, and what does it mean to be fluctuating like that? And then a conversation might open up around, what does the body need to have not emotional stability, because we kind of want the whole perspective, the whole range, but to have hormonal balance, even inside of estrogen withdrawing and a new hormone profile being set up.
So it's something there around kind of riding the shift rather than fighting the shift, and realizing that things are changing. Balance and change are not necessarily opposed to each other, right?
Yeah, well, maybe balance isn't the exact right word, but yes, they're not opposed, that you can have some harmony in the disharmony. if you understand more about what's going on. And I think that's moving away from the Western narrative and into a more wise woman narrative, which isn't as pathologizing, which isn't as keen to fix and make, like everything that you're going through, if you're a bit all over the place, if you're spitting venom, if you're, crying, then there's something wrong with you. And with that, without any context of a woman's life, and a woman in the Western culture transitioning into decline and decay, which is how the Western world views postmenopause, without acknowledging all of that, then we can't handle the emotions. We can't deal with the emotions effectively, because it might be perfectly normal. Your rage might be perfectly normal. And so, and then once we've established that, how do we need to eat so that hormones are as balanced as they can be, they're as optimal as they can be? And there's a lot of stuff around, the Western diet being terrible for hormonal balance. And I do a lot of re-education for women with the basis of the Wise Traditions diet that revolutionizes women's perspective on how they eat. And, a lot of it has to do with, the very, very common insulin resistance, hypoglycemia, thyroid issues, and stress and adrenal stuff as well, of course.
It makes me think of, I'm a therapist and I work with clients of all ages, mostly women. I have an 80-something-year-old client whose husband died not even a year ago. And friends have been telling her, like, oh, you sure you shouldn't be over it yet? Do you want to get some antidepressants? She's spent a lot of time in her life with him and now he's gone. And the first answer is antidepressants. I mean, she knows that that's not the answer. But it's just fascinating to watch that, even in that elderly kind of world, that's the first response from people.
Yeah. And, I think that's the beautiful thing about the Wise Women's Gathering. We're retraining ourselves on a lot of this stuff. We're going back to, grief is normal. And, grief is it's sort of a rite of passage in itself. So, and this is what makes us extraordinary human beings as we age. So, yeah, I think that I think there's definitely a sacred rebel inside of me that wants to teach women that, that way of thinking is old and redundant and not helpful. And that, what we're learning here with holistic medicine, with holistic perspectives, with earth-based narratives, is, it's embracing that will support us in becoming wise women. Because the fact is that many women after 50 are not wise. I mean, many 60-year-olds are embarrassing. Many 80-year-olds are a pain in the neck. It's not like you become wise just because you get older. It's not, it's valid us looking to the future generations and going, I don't want to be like my mum. How many people tell me, my clients, they'll say, I do not want to be like my mum.
And it's that different space around just doing the work, isn't it? It's not when we say the work, there's not one thing. It's lots of things that we're doing. Yeah.
No, and to be able to use, it's not about the natural medicine and the food necessarily. It's to be able to use those to support the personal growth. It's like, okay, so you can't sleep. Well, let's just think a little bit holistically. Am I having too much sugar? And I'm having a little bit of hypoglycemia in the middle of the night. And, just that way of thinking that empowers responsibility, and to have, that first aid kit in your kitchen, in your home, chamomile tea, magnesium phosphate, whatever it is, to support everything that supports moods.
And that comes back to that teaching piece you said, like if we teach our people that we work with how to do it for themselves, teach them what to have in the cupboard, when to use it, then it's half the work done. They don't need to be coming out to practitioners all the time.
Or doctors or chemists or
Yeah.
drugs, right?
All the professionals.
We'll put ourselves out of business.
Well, I always joke about that, like that's what I want. I would like to get to a point where I don't have to see people anymore because they're, they've moved through and they're good and they're stable and supported. Of course, we know that there's layers of that, right? So people might go away for a bit and then come back again. As you're saying, like moving through those stages of the cycle, there's going to be, okay, now I need some more support again. Like tell me what let's work on this piece that is different to how it was before.
Yeah, and I really see myself more and more as a guide rather than as a, health practitioner. And, my coaching skills are, I've done lots of coach training and I just love every bit of it. It's what makes the difference. And, I think things are going to get worse before they get better. So, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, we talk about organic food and being a nutritionist and being a naturopath. And, a couple of 100 years ago, it was all organic food. Every woman was a naturopath and a nutritionist. All of that wisdom was in the mother in the kitchen, or the grandmother, or the
in the garden.
In the garden, and they chat about it in the knitting bee, So yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's what Wise Women Gathering is about, making sure those ancient, or not even ancient, but traditional wisdoms don't fall by the wayside, right? And being able to provide those spaces. There's been a lot of conversation this weekend about waiting in the cafeteria line or sitting at the tables, or, these little in-between spaces where so much of the work gets done because we're chatting and, oh, you went to that workshop. I wanted to do that. What was that about? Just the crossover that happens in the conversations. That's the piece that's missing from our overculture because, all the reasons, isolation, separation, all of that. And so we get to like spend a weekend just doing that and then take that out into the world and still have those networks and connections. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge you for, being a big part of that. And I'm sure it's a labor of love amongst everything else. And it's partly why I come back. I feel, like I said, I feel a sense of obligation because I am a wise woman and because I am working with other women who need this. And each year I learn a little bit more and a little bit more. And I feel this sacred obligation to share that and to bring more people to the gathering and to awaken the young mothers. I've had clients that are 30-year-olds that are clueless and lost and at sea when it comes to mothering. And I think, well, let's just start to teach you how to make a broth and how to ferment some sauerkraut so that you can at least support your child's gut health. And I feel that the more I do that and promote it to others, that I'm passing it on, I'm paying it forward, and that it's where we're going. It has to be where we're going in the future, because what we're doing to the earth right now is unsustainable. We'll either be all wiped out, or there'll be suddenly this, oh my goodness, we need to go to the wise women to find out. And and I hear it on the TV occasionally, or on the radio or wherever. They've discovered that microbes are cleaning up the toxins, or nature saves us, right? So yeah, that's why I keep coming. I feel my duty. Beautiful duty. I don't mind it at all.
Yeah, that's so nice. Oh, that's a whole other way to look at it, actually, that particularly with the maybe elder women, like we you keep showing up because there's still more to learn, but also like just your presence is a shared element of it. Yeah. Kerry Alexander and I always joke, because we're sort of in the we're not quite, let's just say we're not quite elderly yet. And I always say to her, like, we'll still be here in 20 years, man. Like we'll still be like we'll be the old ladies then. Like, so we gotta just keep showing up and we can do whatever we want now because that's what informs whatever comes into the future. Like
Yeah.
we have to be there. Like elders don't come out of nowhere. You have to do the work when you're young to get there.
No,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. And that's where we're at the moment. There's not enough of a legacy of wise women to get women to that age who are wise. And so there's this this absence of wisdom. And it's not just women, there's absence of wisdom in our culture.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that I noticed that Jane Hardwick Collins is just moving into, actually Sequoia talked about it, moving into that next, more crony sage essence kind of stage of talking from that wise woman perspective. So, we can't teach what we haven't been to. And so as she's now, I guess, well past menopause, it's like, okay, now we're speaking to this next phase. And there's a bunch of women that will be there with her already that have come through this community.
Yeah.
It's very powerful to keep unlocking those doors, and then we have Louise Kanji offering rites of passage around hysterectomy, and there's all these little nuances now that we're seeing that, I mean, definitely wasn't there in the 80s, but really wasn't even there in the 2000s. So it's exciting. Yeah, women are taking it on. So we've asked all our educators for a gift to share with everybody. I'm pretty sure you sent it to me, but I cannot remember what it is. So why don't you tell us what the beautiful gift is that you're offering to everyone who's listening?
Well, I've created this gorgeous PowerPoint presentation, which sounds very dull, but it's not. And on menopause. And it's a lovely introduction to menopause as a beautiful thing, as a something to look forward to, as an opening into our power. So I've got lots of beautiful quotes in there, lots of beautiful images, and then some specific help there's 4 things that I've talked about: hot flushes, insomnia, depression, and pain. Very common symptoms during that 45 to 55 age range. And so I'm offering that for free. And I don't think I've even done it so that you have to sign up for anything. So
It just arrive and it's there.
Yeah, you just click the link. It's my Dropbox. And I think that it's a tool for anyone who's interested to use it, and you could show it to your husband. I think a lot of the husbands would love. I've often thought of doing a webinar for husbands on menopause.
For sure.
But women can show it to their husbands. Say, see, look, this is normal. This is normal.
Yeah, I'm not a bitch like you said I am. This is all part of the process.
Yeah, and or their daughters, or it's just a little bit of teaching.
That's really great. That's really great. I love the levels of education that we get to here, just through everybody's own tapestries coming together and then what shared out from that. So good. Yeah. All right, Brenda, I'm conscious that I'm going to need a little rest before the next person because I'm feeling quite done. So why don't you tell everybody where they can go to find you, socials, all those pieces. Of course, we've got the symposium pages, which will have this video up later, and it will have all the link to that PowerPoint. So that's the PowerPoint link is already there. The video will go up tonight. But where else can they find you on the internet?
Well, I think the easiest thing is to go to my Linktree profile. So if you look up Linktree and then search, I called it Women's Wisdom School a couple of years ago. I'm thinking that's ambitious, but it's the Women's
Very
Wisdom
smart
School.
branding.
And That's got my in there are all my links. So there's free podcasts in there. There's my Femifesto, which is a women's manifesto. Oh, so great. And my email address and that kind of thing, all in that Linktree link. And so
and we've put that link tree is in the symposium page. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a place to start. Yeah.
Awesome. Beautiful. I appreciate you coming, and I'm going to see you in less than 2 weeks. Amazing. So let's turn the recording off, and I'll have a chat to everyone about discount codes.